Okay, so here we are at Asian Allies, and we're going to talk about the mass murders, the two mass murders of two Asian populations, as well as Lunar New Year. And so I'm wondering, is there from the Asians here, do you want to share like how you found out and kind of what your thoughts are? And as you sunk in and read more about it and learned about it, how did it make you feel? Does anybody want to start with that?
I
Go
can
ahead.
go start.
Oh,
Oh, did someone else raise their hand?
go ahead, Gil, and then 𝗨희𝗳cie𝗿𝘁𝘂.
Sure, yeah. So I first heard about the incident in Monterey Park, and I mean, my first impression was just shock. And then once I started looking at the news more, and then especially seeing the names of the victims all around the 50 to 70 range, I mean, it just made me think of my uncles and aunts and my parents too, that enjoy dancing and learning ballroom dancing too, and going to that similar studio. And I just can't imagine what those families are going through, losing those people that have been a part of their lives for like so many years. So to see the names and the ages, that really had a big impact on me. And then so I asked my ERG group, if anyone wants to have a listening circle, to let me know. And then all of a sudden I saw like a thread about another one in Half Moon Bay, and that's what really was so sad to see a second one in such a short amount of time. And so we have our quarterly meeting with all our Spire members of around 1,100 folks, and I'm going to start off with a moment of silence with the names of the known victims' names on the screen before we start our meeting, where I would typically have like some music played from our playlist. It'd be a lot more upbeat, but this time, I mean, to recognize those victims and the families, we're going to have a moment of silence. Also, our leaders have been involved too, that I've notified within our company too, and they've sent out notes to our group. And so we've gotten support from our leaders as well to help our community. But after our first half of the meeting, we're going to have our listening circle where we'll be able to just digest together and try to work through all our feelings.
So I'm wondering, Gil, how did your day after you heard of these things? Were you able to do your other work, or were you distracted? I mean, where was your head, do you think?
Yeah, definitely distracted, because I was after like more data, trying to find out like, what exactly happened. Was there a motive that they had, just trying to process it and understand, because there really can't be any reason why you would kill innocent people. I just don't see any reason for that. And from there, I was thinking about just my ERG. How can I support them? What can I do to show my support? But yeah, it was it's just so hard for me to process why anyone would want to do such a thing.
Thank you. And 𝗨희𝗳cie𝗿𝘁𝘂?
Thank you for this forum. When this first happened, when we first heard about the shootings, my first reaction was, oh no, more Asians getting attacked again. That was how I felt. And then when it turned out to be an Asian perpetrator, it was, again, the question of why would somebody do that? But also it made me also think about mental health issues that are so hard in our community, because I think that mental health is often, kind of not much attention is paid to. And I think that quite often these shooters are very lonely. They're not really engaged with their community, and that's what makes them do desperate and awfully hateful things. And, it just made me really sad. When I see this, I see tragedy on all sides. And also what's really hard is being Asian American, you also feel like your acceptance in American society is also conditional, right? As long as we work hard and do what we need to do, we're accepted. Some people call it Asians white adjacent, right? And part of it is also just for safety. But the issue here is that we all feel so unsafe, felt so unsafe. And now, like, then we heard about, in Monterey Park, where the hospitals, they couldn't even say where the people were being taken to because somebody had called and left a message about finishing the job. And it's just traumatizing in many, many ways. I felt sick. I've been kind of trying to ignore it, but it's hard. You can't do that. And I try not to let it impact my own work. And I've gone from banking to being a full-time matchmaker, which is really different. And it's all about, bringing people together and not something so awful like this. So I'm still processing it and trying to see where there's hope, because in my community, we organize a New Year's gathering in our school district with all the students. And the first thing is, do we just cancel this event? We have 250 people coming. Do we cancel it? But then I said, no, we can't. We can't let hate, make it out over love, right? It's all about, and our community needs the support. And so I sent out a letter, and the feedback has been so heartwarming because people are coming together and showing support. And in the letter, I also wrote, well, what should our allies do? A lot of Asians are very traumatized right now. And sometimes just a simple, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Really goes a long way to show care. And I think that's just really important, that we should not let hate win over. And we should really just find a way for our community to come together and move beyond this. This should not be a defining issue. Oh, there you go. Said a lot.
Thank you. Other Asians that would like to share? And welcome, John.
Well, I guess I could say something or two. In general, this kind of stuff is very difficult to talk about nonetheless. And it's kind of hard because, even having a conversation about it right now is difficult, because I guess what I'm trying to say is, I've always, being so young, I've always wanted to say, well, I don't want to play the victim. I don't want to get overly upset or offended over things. I want to keep working. I don't want things to impact my life or my success or my career or whatever future I've mapped out for myself. But this stuff, it does weigh on you, and it makes you realize that, there might be some things that might happen that might not necessarily be in my control, and I don't know if that will happen because of my race or not. I've always been one to kind of compartmentalize and kind of push down racial things, like stuff that I've experienced in the past. I'm not one to want to always talk about it. So it's that kind of difficulty is definitely there. There's part of you that says, I don't want to dwell on this. I don't want this to, ruin my day. I have, job search to do. I have school work to do, blah, blah, blah. But it's a very, it's a hard kind of reminder at times. And I'm still, I guess, and maybe I'm still not sure how to really deal with it. I don't really know. But that's just kind of my thoughts on it. So.
Thank you. Well, I think at least what I've found is talking about it. And for the rest of you, so I'm Japanese, Chinese, Swedish, 4th generation. The closest language I have is some Spanish in 9th grade and some ASL, American Sign Language. So those are my languages, and I know a little bit of vocabulary for Japanese. I have a pretty decent accent, I think, or understandable. So I feel pretty far from the Asian. So I never know how much of me is very American and white, and how much is Asian. And so I'm always wanting to hear from other Asians. And so yesterday I was reading through all the comments on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Asians, professional Asians out there who I added to my network, because I realized, oh, I don't have any Asians in my network, and certainly no loud ones, none that will say anything. And so I added them, and just reading all the things that they're saying and understanding how profoundly and paralyzing that this is each time. And I found that this was particularly frustrating that it's an Asian who was shooting up other Asians, and that was very challenging for me. And anybody would like to speak to that?
I have a different perspective, and I've been reading some of the things you've been writing and posting and watching your videos, and
Yeah.
This is all very distant from me. I'm very disconnected from it, and I'm very disconnected from most of the shootings in America anyway. My girlfriend is Canadian, and she is trying to get back there right away because America is this horrible place.
Yes.
And we spent a lot of time in the UK this year. I was in Australia early in the year. And what I see is that this is considered by the world just to be something that's another American shooting, mass shooting. And that is America. They don't see the lines and the differences quite as easily. And I happen to live in Austin, Texas, which is so integrated in terms of people and cultures and, you know, anti-conservative, you know, a little bit more progressive kind of thing. So there's a little bit more equality. And when something happens to somebody that's racist or, you know, bigoted, whatever, it gets really attacked very quickly. I mean, people are up in arms about things like that happen. So being that there's not really an Asian community here, I haven't noticed it. Being that it's on the headlines of my Australian news and my UK news and even the South African news that I read and Irish news, it's just another sort of shooting. So I feel a little more detached, and I don't, you know, when 9/11 happened, all I wanted it to do was to not have happened. How do we go back and take that back? And every time there's a shooting, how do we go back and take that back? And I think it was a little bit that 𝗨희𝗳ცი𝗿𝘁𝗂 said too, is what is it about these people and, you know, what help that they need? And this is a little bit different. So this sort of shocked me that this was a 72-year-old man. And then in the second shooting, it was a 67-year-old man. And just in the circumstances and what they were, I don't know how to reach to the Asian community to understand the impact it's having on is this increasing the fear? Because I don't, you know, I'm detached from it. So I don't quite have the empathy or the sympathy. You know, I have sympathy for mass shootings all the time, and it's getting a little bit crazy. I can stand up and say, gun control, gun control, gun control. And then it just is a stupid argument that is politicized rather than humanized, I guess, if you will. So I'm a little bit further away from it, I think. And I think that because I've got this view that I see from outside countries, it hasn't really been, it's been something horrific, but it seems just normal to people looking from the outside into America. And that bothers me, and I don't know what to do about it. So that's part of why I'm here, to see all your perspectives.
Let me just say, I went to go thumbs up and I bonked my microphone and bonked myself. Anyways, yes, well, you're at the right place. Go ahead, Patty.
Oh, I'd like to, I saw 𝗨희𝗳ცი𝗿𝘁 had her hand up, so I'd like to defer to 𝗨희𝗳ცი𝗿𝘁 and I'll go after.
I'll make it quick, but I think that if you look at the way the Americans shoot, you know, a lot of mass murders, quite often it was perhaps a disgruntled teen, right, who went in, you know, Columbine, right, went into the high school and shot up people. So we kind of had that type, right? And now what you have, what I'm worried about, which I think is probably going to happen, you have a disgruntled, unsocialized elder Asian male, you know, and probably, you know, doesn't have, you know, probably divorced, doesn't have a stable family, and is disengaged from society and is desperate and resorts to shooting. And I think that's, as an Asian community, we feel that, you know, we feel that you know, at least for me, a sense of sadness and shame that, oh my goodness, now we're already reduced to monolithic perspective. Asians are all this way. And now you have this new stereotype. I fight so hard against stereotypes, but we can't help what's in the news, and negative news gets publicized. And now you have this new trope of the angry, I hate to say angry elder Asian man. And it's kind of scary.
It just to add to that, if you go back to all the other shootings and the people who did it, whether it was, a teenager, disgruntled or whatever, it was always about, oh no, it's mental health, it's mental health, it's mental health. There's been none of that. Nothing in the news has said, this particular shooter had a mental health issue. There's none of that. It's been quiet about that. They don't know what to say about this. I think this has really sort of put them in a position where they can't carry on and make all of this noise. But I think you're right. I think it'll come out to be this new trope of a disgruntled elderly Asian man. But who knows which one next? One of my Australian friends posted it's only 23 days in and there's been 30 mass shootings in America.
39 actually as of today.
Unbelievable.
So Patty and then Kevin.
I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm going to try to organize them. I guess first I want to acknowledge what people have said. Ethan and 𝗨희𝗳cie and Jolene, when you were talking, and Gil, I could just I just felt such a heaviness in my heart and a lump in my throat, and I had to keep reminding myself to stop stabbing my tongue into the roof of my mouth. I'm just very touched that you're sharing that. And I was horrified by the shooting. And, my first thought, it's going to be someone white. And then when I found out it wasn't, my next thought was, oh shit, white people are going to use this as a hall pass for anti-Asian hate. And so that was my second thought. And and then the next thought I had, and it's not being confirmed at all, but my thought was, domestic violence, and domestic violence crosses cultures. It is something that makes us all unsafe. When you look at the Boston bomber and a whole lot of mass shootings, there is a history of physical assault that has often happened in the home. Now, I don't know if that's the case. I hope we can make some gains on that and not use that as a way, this shooting as a way to absolve white people for what has happened. I'm in Canada, and recently there was an assault where an elderly Asian woman was shoved really hard to the ground and she died. And this person had done it before and was released. As a society, we do not handle physical assault properly or domestic violence properly. We care a lot about property violence, but not so much about people violence. And so that was thinking. And the other one is, I've talked to my family and they'd say, when I bring things up, they would say, what about Black on Black crime? And I'm thinking, well, some of the biggest cases I'm following right now are white on white crime. It's not unusual for people of certain groups to commit crimes against their own group because that's who they're around. I mean, but these sort of thoughts are not easily expressed in a soundbite. And I understand there's a huge two-prong lack of safety right now with Asian people in our communities because there's a lot of hate against Asian people. And then you have an event like this. And I have seen some stories on mental health. And they need to talk about it. And I think perhaps the model minority pressure on Asian communities as well as cultural expectations, keep people quiet in expressing their needs and their need for help. And I hope that this might be beginning to change some of that. And I haven't said anything on Facebook because I don't know how to say this elegantly, and I don't want to make the situation worse. And as much as in white people doing something, it's like imperfect action. I'm really afraid of making a mistake that will hurt other people. So I'm hoping I could be a little more brave with this. So thank you.
Yes, let me support you in that, Patty, because that's my whole network, and that's why I'm not friends with them anymore. So you are here, and I appreciate that. And so if I can support you, because we have to make mistakes. I'm sure I make mistakes all day long, and then I recover from it. And also in the process, oh, look at that bold Asian. Oops, she just said dumb instead of lacking smarts, or I just said some accessibility word that was the wrong thing. It's like, oh, thank you for telling me. And then I learned. So thank you for being here. Kevin.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is, I think it's really critical that the media follow up on these suspects and find out hopefully what their motivation was and what their background was. A lot of times when they have these shooters in situations like this, they scrub their social media. They do a lot of work to find out what could potentially have been the motivation. So I'd really like them to do that, because I think that before we get too much into these conversations, even though I think these conversations are critical and vital, I think the more knowledge that we have about what was driving this person, the more depth of understanding we're going to have. Because I was thinking of, I was surprised too that it was an Asian killing other Asians, but then I thought about internalized depression, and I thought about the fact that just because, or black on black crime, so to speak, or why do black people burn down their own businesses when they have riots? Because I was a child when they had the riots in the 60s. So, and there's a reason for that. And it stems from different forms of oppression and racism. It doesn't always manifest itself in one particular way. So I think it's really important to find out, because I think that hopefully, if the more we find out, maybe we can actually prevent some of these things from happening, because we have more insight into either mental illness or what particular communities or people are going through. So I guess that's what my thoughts are about. I really appreciate everybody being so candid and honest with what they're feeling, because it has a ripple effect. And I think we're taught in this society in particular to repress things and, oh, have a good day and smile and all that. And you wind up with an ulcer or seeing a therapist for 5 years because of things like this.
And just from what we've all said so far, it's so helpful, because Asians sharing, we need that constantly, because like Trevor said, he doesn't know. And we need to have the bold Asians or vocal Asians just share, yeah, that impacted my week, or that gave me nightmares, or wow, I felt alone. Like all the things that we're feeling, they need to hear it from voices, and voices that they know, or several voices, to make sure that just wasn't a sensitive person. And then Patty sharing some of her fears. This is a lot of white people, like, I don't know what to do. I'll do nothing. And Patty is so brave to share this with us. And so it's like, this is like exactly what we're supposed to be doing. So thank you. I wanted to talk about the piece about the Asians, that it's Asians that were shooting Asians. And I think, both of these stories, both Monterey and Half Moon Bay, these are people that they know. So it's not like it's a random thing. And I wanted to share this real quick here. So 𝗨희𝗳cie𝗿𝘁𝘂, she worked at CNN, and she's a fantastic journalist. And let me share this with the sound. I want to share a little bit of what she says to help us kind of think about and focus on the victims. Okay, here we go. This is 𝗨희𝗳cie𝗿𝘁𝘂.
Many of you know there was a mass shooting in Monterey Park, California, last night, Saturday, at a ballroom dancing club. And this was the eve of Lunar New Year, which obviously is one of the biggest holidays that Asians celebrate. There have been preliminary reports that have come out about the shooting and the shooter, In a morning press conference, officials said that they believe the shooter is an Asian male who is still yet to be apprehended. For the API community, immediately, of course, so many of us thought this was a hate crime before we heard any other reports, because the target was a mostly Asian club in a mostly Asian area of Monterey Park. But let me just say just one thing. Regardless of the motive, please understand why this is affecting us so deeply. And I say us meaning the API community. For 3 years, we have been living in fear because of anti-Asian hate. That has gone on for 3 years of violence, of death, of beatings, of verbal harassment, and it still continues. It hasn't stopped. So for 3 years, we have all been living with anxiety and fear of being harassed and attacked or killed. Living in fear for our elders, living in fear for our children, living in fear for Asian women. And so when something like this happens, again, regardless of the motive, it exacerbates that fear. It reignites that fear and intensifies it. And so, again, regardless of motive, this just affects the API community in a way that maybe others don't understand. It just reminds us that there is fear to live with. And unfortunately, it happened on Lunar New Year when everybody wanted to go out and celebrate and go to festivals and go to parades and go dancing and go be with family and friends. And now that is impacted by something so violent and so deadly. And so please keep that in mind, that don't brush this off saying, oh, it's not a hate crime, so it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a big deal because people died. It's a big deal that once again, we're dealing with a mass shooting. And it's a big deal that Asians are scared. We still are.
So any thoughts on that?
I have to say something. This is the thing that I've seen over the last months about anti-Asian hate and how that is inspiring fear. That wasn't even, obviously that's the first thought, but that wasn't really my thought. And this video really helped just make sure that I remembered that Asians are living in fear, and I need to remember that and be an ally for that too. So that was really important. Thank you.
Good. Go ahead, Cindy.
It really, it's what she says echoes kind of what we're all feeling. And for me personally, I grew up in LA, right? So Monterey Park was where we went every weekend to go get our yummy Chinese food. My uncles and aunts all live there. I know most of the, when I saw the street, I'm like, oh, I know where this is. My mother and my father did ballroom dancing. I used to laugh at them, like, oh, so embarrassing. It was like mortifying, like, oh my gosh, can you look more silly? But it's just part of the community. So this really strikes home. This is my community. And also the issue earlier on also about like what made, what triggered these men. There are a lot of marginalized Asians. I mean, Asian community is very superficial. It can be about wealth. So if I had to kind of craft a persona, and again, we don't know the facts, but my guess is financially unsound, not stable jobs, probably shunned by their peers because, a lot of, if they didn't have a strong career, they probably didn't really have good romantic prospects, single. I mean, there's kind of a type, my dad is 88 years old, and his mental health has been one thing that I've been working on for the last 10 years after my mother passed, was to keep him in a community, keep him socialized, because I think so many Asian men, especially if they're kind of older and, they just, there aren't activities for them. They're not welcomed. And so I could very much see this happening to a lot of people. And I And I know a lot of very cranky old friends of my dad's that aren't in that desperate situation, but I could see them kind of going in that direction just because society isn't there for them. They don't have a community to be with and friends that will be around them. There's no senior citizen centers. It's just not there. So anyways.
Thank you for painting the picture. And just to reiterate, each time we see an Asian, it's like, oh, that's like my relative every time, because there's such a lack of representation. You know, Crazy Rich Asians, not so much, right? Like, oh, I can't really relate. And oh, Shang-Chi, not so much. But person walking on the street who's old or just an Asian, it's like, oh, that looks like my relative every time. So that's why we never see Asians represented ever on the TV, except for, you know, everywhere all at once just now. But so that's why it's so, and then you add on all the violence that I keep track of. And I wanted to share a couple, this is a post from one of the Asians on LinkedIn. It's typical for people to ask, what race was the shooter? Were these hate crimes? What really constitutes a mass shooting? I mean, those are the first things. Actually, I asked who's the victims. That's the first thing and so these are questions, you know, I think a lot of us think about, but to just think about, okay, regardless, these are a bunch of people who died, and just like, okay, let's keep the focus on who died and how do we and why. And in case there was any doubt, the following comments do not help. Oh, don't worry. The shooters were Asian, so it's not a hate crime. It's not that bad. These shootings happen all the time. I guess you people really aren't the model minority after all. So funny. And what shootings? And I think that's the what shootings, that's one where people usually don't know. I'm very pleased that both of these mass murders made the news. I saw it on NPR, not just my Asian American networks. So, and I saw it on a number of like neutral, or I'm not sure neutral. I listened to more liberal. So, yeah. So, so I was glad about that. Okay. Are there any things that you would like to hear? So there were 4 people who reached out to me, by the way. And so if you're thinking about your Asian networks, oh, I don't want to say the right thing, it's so awkward, just reach out and like just validating, oh my gosh, another attack on Asians, that's so horrible. You know, how are you doing? You know, do you want to talk? I mean, and then that's enough. I mean, I think a lot of Asians are so used to like nobody saying anything ever. And for the 4 people who reached out to me, white dude from Nebraska, I met 30 years. That was Rob Tejan, mom and dad. We met at Club Med, cowboy dancer guy. So it's like, oh, it made it to Nebraska. Fantastic. And he was just like thinking of you. And he didn't even mention the murders, right? And that's like, oh, that's nice. And so I think this is different. I think different what I've learned about how to reach out to Black people, right? I think it's a different culture. Asians are not being used to reached out to. We're used to being ignored. And so I think you can err with Asians, just reach out with anything and then also be okay with nothing in response. So it's like yesterday I was just like combing through all the stories. What are the updates? Why did this happen? Who is it? Oh, Vietnamese shooter. Oh, are these Chinese clubs? Oh, is that something? Oh, Vietnamese Chinese, you know? And I was busy because I have this meeting and then this other Asian meeting thing tomorrow. And so I'm very busy, but I was so glad that Rob and Joan reached out to me. Even if I didn't respond, I'm like, oh, that's nice. So I think in terms of reaching out, it's really important. So any from Gil or Ethan, would you like to comment on that from your perspective?
Yes, I totally agree about reaching out. I noticed our team's channel was silent after all this news was happening. So it just took one post from me just to say, how's everyone doing in regard to these incidents? And is there any interest in having a listening circle? Then all of a sudden a slew of comments just went through, people saying like, yeah, I'm trying to process. I know this is a tight-knit group, and I'm glad that we're thinking of doing a listening circle. And the thread just kept going on with people and sharing their different emotions. And I think the Asian perspective of this really too is what 𝗨희 said, is like it happened right on the eve of like Lunar New Year, which is a time of celebration with families and happiness and joy. So, I mean, I think you can equate it to like, if something like this was to happen on Christmas Day and you're out with your family, how would that impact you if this had happened? And so, yeah, for our community here at work, Lunar New Year is supposed to be a fun, joyous time, and we're happy, we're smiling, we're enjoying learning about the culture, and it's supposed to be a happy, festive time. And I'm just imagining for that area how that's now been tainted. Like, whatever, the next Lunar New Year, I could just imagine them thinking about this moment forever. So it's going to be long term with what happened there, and it's just so unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way for those of you who want to try and convey a message. It's like, well, what if this happened on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day? That's pretty good parallel. And 𝗨희𝗳cie𝗿𝘁𝘂, representative, she is putting through initiative to make Lunar New Year a holiday. So maybe that'll be helpful. Ethan, do you have anything to add to that? Ethan, are you frozen? Oh, no, you're moving. Okay. Sorry. Did you have anything to add to that? How you're feeling again?
Yes. I think, can people hear me? Oh boy, everybody
Okay.
else is frozen, but I'm
Okay,
oh
we
boy.
can hear your voice now.
We good?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I think, well, my school, I'm part of the an Asian student achievement program with my school's multicultural affairs kind of group. And there was a counseling space for like an hour with the office just in the wake of everything, and kind of emails were sent out, stuff like that. So there was that, which I think was good. I didn't end up going, but it was, I think, good that they had something there. Like I said, going back to what I said earlier, I've always wanted to be like, the stereotypical, Asian man. You work hard, you keep your head down. Yeah, you just, you gotta work hard. You gotta do what you gotta do, right? But I think it's very sad though when these things happen, in terms of like whether these events are reported by the news or not, they're still going on. And that has to be acknowledged, if that makes sense. This stuff is still happening. And these things can be very hard, I think, for a lot of Asians, I'm sure, with constantly seeing more events like that. You ask yourself, like, when is it going to stop? Why us? I've been thinking a lot about that recently. So I don't know. It's just it's something, I think, with that too. I think is, like I said, like, I mean, I think everyone agrees with this, whether you're, everyone's Asian or not. Like, obviously, we don't want these things to happen, right, to anyone, Asian or any other group, because they're wrong, right? But it's like the question of, why does this keep happening? What did we do? What do we do about it? What do we do to deserve it? Why does this keep happening? So I don't know. That's where my head's been at for the past couple of days, or just off and on thinking about this, I think. So
I made, I think 5 videos yesterday. I shared just 2. But I think this is, I wanted people to think about, how are they portraying the news? I'm very always observing the mass murders. Do they talk about the victims? If they're Black, then they say they're Black. If like the Uvalde, there were Mexican children, but that wasn't we know they were Mexican, but that wasn't usually said. It's a Mexican community, but the way one of the reporters was like, oh, this unfortunate, it's really unfortunate. Mass murders of Asians, it's unfortunate. And then the other guy, yeah, it's unfortunate. These are newscasters. And do you say if white people were killed, do you say, oh yeah, it was really it's unpleasant. It was unfortunate. And to just observe how that goes.
I wanted to, if I could jump
Yeah.
in for a second, and Jolene and I have talked about this before, but in being a member of the media, I've been in newsrooms and radio stations, et cetera. And it's like, I think a tragedy and a murder is a murder and a tragedy. So I don't think there's, if somebody's murdered, to me, it's just a horrendous, horrible thing, no matter who it is. However, I was thinking of the recent murders in Idaho of the college students, and how that was a huge national story. Now, being
Forever.
regional,
Forever. That's been
well,
going on.
being regional, I understand it, of course, because it's, it's Idaho, but it was a huge national story. And it was almost as if the media was saying, yeah, there's a lot of crime, but this one stands out from the rest because it was 4 white kids. Whereas,
and they're pretty too.
Yeah. And had that been, I don't know, 3 Mexican girls or something, would it have gotten the same attention? So I think with the media, it's almost like some of them feel that crimes involving people of color, oh, well, that's not news because that happens all the time. It's almost like this expectation, that, oh yeah, that neighborhood, yeah, happens all the time. We're only going to give that a couple paragraphs, but a suburban white housewife in Montana, that's unusual. So that's a story, but I don't think they understand the ramifications and the effect that has on people. And it also reinforces a lot of stereotypes, because I've worked with clients in the past. I remember one in particular that wanted to, up in Bothell, there was a school up there. They hired me to try and help them get more students of color to enroll. They had a welcome packet. I looked at the welcome packet. You come to this area and you go to the Space Needle, you go to Snoqualmie Falls. Well, the entire central district of Seattle is like somebody had carved it out of the map. It didn't exist. And I said, well, why isn't the central district in here? Oh, well, we didn't want our students to be in any kind of harm's way because, there's a lot of crime there. So therefore, we're not even going to tell them about it. And this is somebody who lives in Bothell, which is about 50 miles away from the central district, but that's the perception. And then they just reinforce the existing stereotypes, and the media does it as well, I think.
So well, I can't remember that.
I'm done.
I can't remember that white girl's name who was in the news. I just tracked the blogger person. Oh my gosh, that was so annoying. So this is what I shared the other day. It was a little video, but when the murdered victims are Asian, it's unfortunate. If you want to be inclusive, this is an action. Inclusivity doesn't happen by itself. Racism doesn't just go away. This is like to all the silence out there. And if you didn't hear about the murders of the 11 Asians in Monterey and the Half Moon, then you might want to add more Asian American news and more Asians into your feed. And so here's action items because, and again, this is just for the people who want to be inclusive, hear ideas. And then I think I also made another video saying, reach out to your people, reach out to your Asian Americans, and, get over the fear of saying the wrong thing, because it means a lot on the other end. I remember I was listening to 𝗨Ι𝗳ცი𝗿𝘁𝘂𝘁𝘂. I remember listening to Dion Lim, who's a reporter in San Francisco, and she is able to report on Asian American stories on her own little site, not on the big news. She reports on other things on the news, but on her own channel, she can report on Asian stories that other people don't care about. And she said that with the Atlanta shootings, like one of her coworkers just brought her some cookies. And it's just like, yeah, that totally would work with me. But it's just like being validated, knowing that you are there. Like, we see you, even though you're just in your little cave at your Zoom studio, we see you. And so it's just those little acknowledgments that I think are so important to hundreds of Asians that I hear from. So is there anything else we might want to discuss before we just quickly talk about Lunar New Year's for a second? And Trevor and Patty, are you feeling like you're getting a better sense of what's what and also what you can do and why to make mistakes?
Yeah, I think I needed, sorry, I needed the push a bit, because, it's easy to sit on the sidelines, especially when you're white, and, it has been on my mind, and it just, yeah. So something is better than
Yes.
saying nothing. And, I have family members that I really struggle with to a certain extent on some of these issues. And part of it is if I put something out there and then they go in there, and not that I'm afraid of, I'm often, I grew up being sort of the lone voice in the wilderness. Sorry. But, and it's just so upsetting when it's your family member doing or saying something. And so I just need to just go there,
Well,
and,
I mean, do what you will, Patty, with the family. Family's tough, I think.
yeah.
But I mean, certainly your other sphere that might be a little bit easier and just little validations, right? And when you messaged me and when you gave me you pronounced the little thing for my video, big deal. That's a huge help. And so there's these little things that are so, so helpful, and you could help a ton of Asians in this way. And so you can do heavy lifting when you have the energy, and but you can also do small validations that are really helpful.
That is a good point. And so listening to what people were saying, I will put something out on Facebook. I pledge that. I'll do that in the morning so that I'm fresher, but I'll also do it on my work channel.
Yeah. And you also, when you take an Asian voice, then it's not you like, oh, I'm so woke, I think blah, blah, blah. Share an Asian voice like I share all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I have videos and posts and whatever. And then and there's many, if you see I have a lot of Asians who say smart things too. And so sharing one of their voices, but you have to add, oh, I didn't realize this. You have to add your little piece to whiten it up. And like, me as a white person, I didn't. So then your white network can be like, oh, okay. Because otherwise, if it's just a share, then it's just like, we don't really understand how we connect to that. But if you validate and say, oh, and in this video, oh my gosh, that was so eye-opening, or, oh, I didn't know this. So then it helps your network understand why to listen.
I have found like a couple of times when I have mentioned a couple of things, people, it's not that they don't care. It's like they'll message me personally and say, I didn't know what to do, so thank you for doing that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like not from a place of uncaring, it's from a place of fear and doing the wrong thing. And here I am, doing that same thing. So sometimes you just have to get in there and do it. And I need to do that. So I really appreciate this. This is what I needed.
And you can also invite them to this group, or like I have all these resources on my website, so they don't have to talk to anybody or feel weird or anything. They can self-learn too. So it's get awkward. Trevor?
So this has been absolutely fabulous, and your post, the one you just showed as well, has been really helpful for me. What I've realized in all of this is I preach action and awareness and action. That's what I preach. And in my signature keynote, I talk about it. And I just realized in this conversation that I actually have audiences that I speak to that I can mention this. So I have a signature keynote called Seeing Stars, and now I have a place for Be an Ally. So thank you for that. And this has really helped sort of clarify one of the ways that I can, that's in my purview that I can help. So thank you.
Yeah, and also when you are highlighting like other groups or individuals, you look way more attractive in terms of like, oh, he's a team person and really, right? I mean,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's interesting because there was a point where I had to meet with coworkers in Montreal at breakfast, and I never really met them. And one of the guys was having a really good look at the waitresses behind, and then started commenting on it. And I said, I'm not going to be complicit anymore. So I said to him, basically, I said, Kevin, this is how it starts. This is how sexual predation begins. And it was the most awkward breakfast that I've ever had from that point on. But I stood up and I said something. And that's hard to do because all our life, you've been hanging around with a group and you do what the group does. And if it's all the men going, or picking on that person, or, whatever it is, anti-Asian, all of that stuff, it's so easy to sort of hide and disappear. And I've been able to, in my life now, stand up and say that. And like I said, I'm very fortunate to be, a tall, threatening white guy that I can actually say things and I can get away with it. So I can be an ally for my friends who are, who are not tall white guys. So
Appreciate that.
I'm going to keep doing that.
Thank you. Kevin, I see you're unmuted. Were you going to say something?
No, I was not. Did you want me
Okay.
to say something?
No. So let's talk about Lunar New Year's for a few minutes. And did anybody celebrate Lunar New Year's or had friends that celebrated? If so, go ahead and share. Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, I went to a local Asian mart. It's predominantly Vietnamese, but they still have some other things for other ethnicities. So I got myself a moon cake. It was the last one there, so I definitely had to snag it. I was gonna get the 4-pack, but I was like, that's a little bit too much money, so I decided to get myself just one. I ate it in the parking lot shamelessly, and it was very, very good. It was very, very good. So I went to the Asian mart, did that. Talked to my dad, I didn't call my Lola directly, but I wished my dad a happy Lunar New Year. I wish my friends happy Lunar New Year too. So yeah, I think that was really about it though. I think that was about it. So yeah.
Yeah, mooncakes are expensive. Gil, did you celebrate?
Well, I set a timeline of different events happening in the Seattle area. So I've heard from folks that have gone to those events. And also our big Lunar New Year celebration, my company tomorrow, we're having it a hybrid event. It's the first time that we're going to be actually in person after the event for lunch. And we had the lunch catered in from a local Chinese restaurant.
Which one?
I can't remember. Jade. I think it was Jade Garden. I think was the name.
Okay, yeah, Jade Garden. Yeah.
And then prior to that, too, we're just having a virtual event for global wide for folks outside of Seattle too to be able to participate. We're going to hear from our leaders, acknowledging what happened from these events, and then after that, it's going to be slides from the different folks around the world that have celebrated how they celebrate Lunar New Year with their families. There's going to be a few slides of that, followed by a trivia with prizes for folks to participate in, and then after that, a line dance performance, and then after that, we're going to break and have lunch, and we're all really excited because this is really the first ERG event that we actually had on site, because the first one that we planned for in 2020, they closed the office right on the day we were going to have it.
And I didn't know that Filipinos celebrated New Year. Can either of you speak to that? Because I didn't know.
Yeah, I actually haven't celebrated Lunar New Year with my family being Filipino. It's only once I became a part of this ERG in terms of showing support for those that do celebrate. That's where I got more involved with celebrating Lunar New Year with them.
Okay, and Ethan also was shaking his head. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never celebrated before. We mainly do regular New Year, but I kind of did a little bit of research. And I think in the Philippines, people do celebrate it, but I don't know for sure actually. But
Hmm.
I've just started doing it after hanging around more Asians and stuff like that. But yeah, no, my family's never really done it. We've always done regular or the we've always done the like regular, annual
Gregorian, I think.
New Year. Yeah, Gregorian. There we go. That's the term.
Thank you.
The Gregorian year. Yes.
Can
So
I ask a weird question? There's
yes.
a, there's a Chinese bakery near me next to the H Mart, and I love going to both of those. Are they going to have mooncakes if I go there tomorrow?
Probably because I think it's day.
Yeah.
I think it's 4 days, at least for Chinese. I think it's 4 days or so.
Excellent.
Yeah. They
All right.
I
I'm
yeah.
gonna go do that, or I'll post it on Facebook and see what response I get.
Yeah, I think so. And so this is the New Year's that I went to. So Bellevue Square. So there's Seattle and then there's Bellevue. And Bellevue is kind of the richer side. And this is where Microsoft is and a lot of tech is. And it is 50, I think it's around 50% people of color and 38% Asian, and meaning Asian, meaning Chinese and Indian. And so this is pictures from that. And it's a fancy mall and it was so well done and so well attended. It was so neat. And the elders were also honored. They were doing the dancing. These are like 70, 80-year-olds dancing and doing the calligraphy. And it was just, look at that, so well attended. And the little kids were cute. And also inside the line are like kids themselves. So it was such a fine example of Bellevue being inclusive, but also in the stores, it was inclusive too. And being in Bellevue, a lot of people have money there. A lot of the Asians have money, particularly in this area. So it's very smart thing to do. And then this is Tet. So Vietnamese, let's see, this is really awesome. This is actually just in Linwood. And so I did this a couple years ago, several times. And it is just massive. So picture this like residential area. And then in the middle of this hill, there's this massive Buddhist temple. So it's pretty neat. And I was married to a Vietnamese man. And so got to learn a little bit about some of the traditions. And so in Vietnamese, you wouldn't, like at his parents' house, they don't leave the house until the year of the rabbit comes to the house and does some sort of blessing or something. And so his parents are very traditional. And then you burn some different incense, even when it's really cold out, and all these different traditions that were really like, ooh, that's hardcore. So it was pretty neat, I thought, to see this little temple, because this is pretty similar to when I was in Cambodia and Thailand, where there's a lot of space, and this is just in a residence. So that's and I will share in Facebook also some videos I did Year of the Rabbit 12 years ago with my ex-in-laws, kind of sharing some of that culture.
It
So
reminds me a little of my college town. They have a strong Chinese heritage because of the gold in Australia. And they have a dragon. They have a Chinese dragon that runs up and down the street right now. And it's called Dai Gum Lung. And we all knew about him. We would go out and watch, and it was the most incredible experience to have all of that. But I never really understood quite the significance of it. So it's becoming more and more important now. So
yeah, and I think that's so one of the reasons I exist here is to be able to share for all these cultural events. I've gone to about 40 of them this last year, outside in public cultural events. And I really want to make sure that when the Black group is doing something with some traditional thing and the Korean group is doing something, explain why. What is the origin? Why does this matter? Why do we care now? For example, the lion dance, it's scaring away evil and something or other. But they never talk about it. And also talking about the discipline. Why does this matter to all these kids who are underneath the lion? Like, why does it matter? And, I interviewed a number of them. It's like you get to be around other Chinese kids who are probably in the corner, at least not in Bellevue and in Redmond where it's super Asian, but like where they're the only Asian. And now you get to be with other people who are not teasing you, and to have just to feel more comfortable, and you're doing something athletic and the discipline. I mean, like, when we do have these ethnic opportunities, it's really share about why this matters, why it matters to these kids, why you in the audience as a white mom should care. What kind of, how can we apply this and make it relevant? And if that act is like not cool, find something that's applicable that people can learn. Because I went to it was a Japanese one, which was like the best one. But this one act was just, it was like, I don't know what instrument it was, but it was just really horrible to listen to. It was very slow, so boring. And if you were going to introduce a different culture to somebody, pick the best ones, pick the most interesting, and then talk about it. Because otherwise it's just like, oh my gosh, ugly other, don't want that. And so I think we're going to continue to be seen as the other until there's a bridge, and that MC and that knowledge is important to be able to impart why we should care about this act that's having. So anyways. So, well, that's all I have to share. I'm really pleased that we were able to talk, and thanks for the bravery of you all sharing. And this is the way that it should work. I'm so pleased. And I'll be sharing more on Asian allies, so to have more resources and to do share the links and everything I share in here. Usually I post it on LinkedIn or Facebook. To Facebook, nobody looks at it whatsoever, but I share it still sometimes. So let's say if Patty, if you wanted to share it from my personal wall, then it's not your voice, you're just validating mine. So it might be easier to do that. So
Yeah, no, that was what I was going to ask you, if you had a LinkedIn presence as well. So
yeah, I do. And I shared recently several.
Excellent. So for work, I'll do the LinkedIn links first, and on Facebook, I'll use your Facebook links then. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you. All right. Any final thoughts?
Just thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all. This was really
Great.
helpful for me.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. And
care.
I'll talk to you all soon. Happy New Year.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year. Yes.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.